Hi, everyone, and welcome back to SunBurst Tarot, where today we're going to be doing a little bit of a different type of thing today, where I want to go through like your first tarot deck and how do you start up with a tarot deck, whether you've been doing it for a while, maybe you haven't, but I wanted to go through a couple things here with just things that we should know, things that we can look at, and the such. So, first things first, I've been a little bit about me. So, I've been reading tarot since 2020. I've been reading tarot really a lot for myself and then started doing things more for others starting about 2022. Uh, where I really started to read more professionally, and then my tarot channel I started up in 23, and then now we are, or no, I started in 20, yeah, started in 23. You know what? I don't even know when anymore, man. I think it was 23 I started it, and then now we're in 25. So I'm a little bit over a year and a half now, I think, that I've been doing tarot online. And like my style has changed a lot since I first started to what I do now. But what I wanted to go through here today is trying to, like, how do you get your first tarot deck? What are things that you should be looking for? What are some maybe common things that people don't do? And also kind of addressing some common myths. So, once again, before I really get started, just a reminder, every reader is going to be different. Every person has a different set of rules and the such that they kind of follow, and everyone has different rituals or ways that feel right for them when it comes to setting up their tarot deck and the such. So I want to say my process versus maybe other people's processes might sound really different, and that's okay. There's not one right way of doing things, but there are some generally good things to kind of learn and do think about. So, first things first, when you first get your tarot deck, like getting a tarot deck, there's been this common myth of it needs to be gifted to you from another person, and I would like to say, no, it doesn't have to be. At least my first decks that I've ever gotten, I bought myself. I was never gifted a deck, and I think I do pretty okay with reading them and the such. The other part of it, too, is there are tons of sellers online. I mean, if you're like, oh my goodness, I'm waiting because I want someone to give me a deck and blah, blah, blah. I think that's more just a myth. If there's a deck that you really want to get into it, I highly encourage get into it. It's something that can help you develop your intuition. It can also be something to kind of just help you do self-reflections for the day too, and the such. But now that we kind of got over that common myth of do you need to give you gifted one or not? Well, not really. So when you're looking at getting a deck, the first thing that I really like, everyone says, oh, get like the Rider-Waite-Smith for learning. Why Rider-Waite-Smith? Because it's the most common deck that you can possibly get. It's super popular. You can find it actually pretty discounted, like as probably one of the cheaper decks out there, just because it's so mass produced everywhere. So typically it's actually really cheap. So if you want to get started into it and you don't want to pay, sometimes decks can go up to like $60. You can typically find the Rider-Waite-Smith for like $10 on like Amazon, or even if you're going to like your local store, which I highly encourage you to do, you can typically find the Rider-Waite-Smith for around sometimes less than $20, sometimes even less than 15, just because it's just so mass produced. So it's a really good starter deck. It's got, and like there's like every interpretation underneath the sun is underneath it. So it's also kind of like the gold standard when it comes to that deck. I highly encourage people to go with it. I would like to say I did not follow that advice. And I actually got a deck. I can actually show you the deck that I got, because I remember my first tarot deck, and I'm like, don't do my mistakes, fair fam. Because yeah, I'm not calling it a mistake. I'm just calling it as like, also there's a part of it too where it's like sometimes the art just calls to you or the deck just calls to you. But the deck that I ended up getting first is called the In2it Tarot. I absolutely love this deck. It was my very first one, and I don't use it for a lot of public readings. This is kind of more just my deck that I like. I also customized it. I got rid of edges because the cards were really large. So if this is a deck that you like, you have or you want, like, don't feel to be like, oh my goodness, I'm defacing the cards. It's like, fam, if your hands are small like mine, like, look at I can bear, like, it used to be like out to here. Like, I could not, like, and I had to cut off like about an inch in total around the edges so I could hold them. It's not a bad thing. I mean, make it comfortable for you when it comes to finding that deck. But there are some common things that I like to say when you're getting your first deck. Just some really common denominators is one. Find like beginner friendly decks. So Rider-Waite-Smith is a very beginner friendly deck. This is kind of that's what this one is. It has the Rider-Waite-Smith imagery on it, but then this one also has like a ton of extra stuff on it for like keywords and kind of what are the meanings, what is its name, where is like what kind of like what element is it associated with, what zodiac sign is it associated with, planets, as well as kind of like yeses and nos. So this is a deck, and I will try it and link it down below, but this is like a really good beginner deck with keywords that I really like, because then again, there's 72 cards in a typical tarot deck, and that's a lot to memorize. It's a lot to memorize. So some people like the keywords because it helps them, and they don't have to go here and then to a book and then they got to figure it out. Like, awesome. I mean, if you're not like jiving with the Rider-Waite-Smith tarot imagery, that's fine too. I actually really hated the imagery, so I had to finally get this deck because, well, it was kind of getting to a point of like, yeah, I should probably get this. I should probably actually start learning the typical stuff because, man, I'm typically not like the one who's like, oh, I'm gonna go learn the original. I'm like, oh no, let's just dive right into the unoriginal, and I'm like, gosh darn it all. So it's been a lot of give and take, and each deck is kind of different too, because like. So if we can go here with the Rider-Waite-Smith Tarot, this is a great beginner deck. Lots of keywords, so you don't have to memorize everything, which is great. Otherwise, I have this deck called the In2it Tarot. This is from a Etsy seller who does called In2it Tarot, and she has this wonderful deck as well with a lot of the similar information but it doesn't have like the yeses or nos, but it's also got planets it's associated with, it's got the keywords, and it's a different art style completely. So if you're more of like, you like this art style better, it still has really similar information, but it's more colorful, and I like colors. Some people don't like colors, and that's fine. Some people like more of like the black and the whites, or just like the two tones or grayscale. I don't have a lot of those decks. I don't think I have a single two-tone color. I might have excuse me, I have one two-tone colored deck, and that is a pink one. But otherwise, the rest of, and a green one. I have a green one and a pink one. I don't know, wicked kind of things. But yeah, like this is just another great, like, if you want good keywords to kind of help you memorize things, and it does have the reversals as well as the upright meanings, so it does help if you're wanting to learn reversals, or if you like to start with too. I would highly recommend, as you're starting to, if you don't want to learn reversals, I would just go with the upright meanings first, because learning the upright meanings is a really good way to start, and then you can do the reversals. And then I also have another, so if you're not so keen on keywords, you're like, I just want the cool imagery, another deck that I have here, it's called the Lightseers Tarot. It's really popular, and it's also another really great beginner's deck. It's got a lot of the similar features from the Rider-Waite-Smith Tarot deck, but it's a lot more colorful. I like the imagery in this one a lot. It really speaks to me. Everything comes in clear for me. I also just like the coloring of it, as it's really vibrant. It's beautiful. The swords in this deck are represented by birds rather than, say, like actual swords. So it's like this is like a more of a communicative deck when it comes to tarot. So yeah, and then I love this deck as well. This is a great beginner deck. And then I have probably one of my favorite. No, it's like one of my favorite beginner decks, and this is the Tarot of the Owls. I love owls; it's a thing. But this is a deck that I really like to use. It's a pretty beginner friendly one. It's got a lot of great imagery. It's really colorful. Again, there aren't as many there aren't keywords or anything with it, but it comes with a beautiful guidebook. Uh, that I will show, because the other good part of like a deck, like when you're looking at a deck, you're gonna also like, if especially as a beginner, getting a really good guidebook helps a lot with the learning. So yes, beautiful imagery, really great, follows a lot of the stereotypical stuff, but also comes with like a guidebook. And this thing is chunky. It's a chunky guidebook, and everything is colored in it, and it comes with the upright and the reversed meanings. Which not every guidebook does, but it's larger print, so it's easier to read for those who might have who have like nearsightedness. Also, I love that it gives you a pretty good description of each reversal or non-reversal, which is super helpful as well. And in this deck too, like they've done a really good job of color coding things and making things like really easy for people to understand. So if you're interested in that, this is another really great introductory beginner deck for you to use. Otherwise, yeah. So that's kind of like what I have for like looking at your best decks. One, if you like a certain imagery, get the certain imagery, please and thank you. If like you're not feeling the Rider-Waite-Smith like I was, like, hey, that's okay. There are lots of other great beginner decks out there that will help you learn, and they're just going to have different imagery that's going to speak to you differently and that you're going to connect with. So that's what I kind of have here when it comes to like beginner decks and the such. So when you're getting, so like, how do you know, like, okay, so this is what a beginner's decks look like. They're really simple. You can kind of go on and be like, good beginner decks for tarot readers. There's a ton of really great lists out there. So like, what makes a difference between like a beginner deck and say more like an intermediate or more advanced deck? So I got two here. So I have my Tarot of the Vampires, which I say is probably closer to a more intermediate deck. Versus like I'm grabbing this out. And my Landscape Tarot deck, which I would say is a more advanced tarot deck, because it doesn't follow the traditional conventions of like the Rider-Waite-Smith or a beginner deck. So with the Tarot of the Vampires, there's a lot of hidden in the imagery on this deck. If you've known of like the Haunted House Tarot is a really popular one on YouTube that people, if they're looking more into darker stuff, I like using the Tarot of the Vampires as it's more colorful. Again, a lot of my decks, this is like the darkest deck that I have, but you can see the amount of color that is kind of in it. So I really, really like, again, I'm more of a color person rather than, say, dark and dank. And so this one's a little bit easier. I would say more of an intermediate to hard, just because it has people in it, and people are easier for some people to, are easier to, or like they have human emotions or emotions that are kind of shown in throughout the deck. But again, a lot of imagery from this deck, more than say like the traditional meanings. Versus like with the owls, each owl seems to have like a personality about it. So it keeps things a little bit more like that beginner to intermediate type here. And it follows a lot of the traditional like human type of aspects. With this deck though, with my Landscape Tarot deck, this is I would say this is a more advanced deck, because when we're looking at it, it's not people. This is all animals. And there's a couple cards in here. Like the Eight of Swords. Like typically this is like a person trapped, like, but has all these swords around them and and then like they're kind of trapped in here. And this Eight of Swords, it's a very different a very different meaning. It's a long, windy path. It's dark out. It's you're only here, and like it's like you're on a beacon or being guided through this giant path of where you need to go. And are you going to go on this path? very different meanings. Same with like the Hanged Man. The Hanged Man's all about seeing things from a new perspective. And here it's like you're having goldfish underwater in a whole different, with like a whole school in this place. With like the Hierophant. The Hierophant is this beautiful like tree like rises up where in a traditional tarot deck it's going to be like the one man, and he's got like I think it's a staff and a sphere or something in his one hand, and like they kind of is over the whole thing. Again, this is like it's it's definitely a more advanced tarot deck that I wouldn't recommend to start off with, but it is a great deck for kind of looking. I like using it to look at anything to do with the world. I think I've used this for all of my alien readings are actually done with this deck, as well as just yeah, aliens. I think I use this for all my dimensional stuff. Anything weird, hunky dory. I think I do my cryptids with that deck as well. So it's a more. Sorry, I put it off screen. Why should I do that? But yeah, it's just a more intermediate. This is definitely a more advanced deck. It's beautiful, but if you're connecting with it, I mean, I still highly recommend it. It's a beautiful deck. I love using it. But it doesn't come out often. It's not a deck that you want to use for everyday stuff. It's a deck that's very situational. So that's what I would say about these two, and like that's the difference in between like an intermediate to like a beginner deck, between a beginner, an intermediate, and a more advanced deck. So that's what I have here. So, and also I've also made my own decks as well. So I mean, if you're not feeling like the decks out there and you're like, well, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? Now, where'd you go? You're around here somewhere. Oh, there you are. I've also gone and I've made my own decks before because I've had like this, like, oh, I want this deck, but it's not made. And so, like, I kind of make up my own stuff with kind of, but I've been doing tarot for a while, so it makes a lot of sense. So, I don't know. I made my own little One Piece kind of, I'm a big fan of One Piece. So, I've been I messaged a few friends and we kind of put together a deck in like a couple days. Is it going to be perfect? No, but I was able to make this up with, and I just made my own with own meanings. A lot of people do this, or they'll sometimes make it up. This is just one I made. It's not for sale. It's not for nothing. I just made something fun that I do, and I just use it for my own personal self. Uh, or I know a lot of people make their own oracle cards as well. And I don't think I've shown these for a while on my channel, but like I make my own oracle cards as well. So if you're looking to make like your own stuff too, where it's like nothing's like going out to you, you can always make your own stuff as well. So, all right. So, I'm going to put some of this away. And then I want to give like when you're first getting your tarot deck, like when you're looking at it, and you're getting your first one and the such, uh, you can sometimes do like a check-in when you're getting your brand new deck of like, how do you feel about me? How is this going to go? And this is kind of like one of the first steps that I like to do when I get a new deck. Some people, when they get it, they unpackage it, they clear it out of all energy. So they'll sage it, they'll put crystals on it, put it underneath the moon to charge it up. Do whatever makes you feel the most like whatever you want to do that makes you feel like the best when it comes to your deck. I typically don't, but hey, if you feel called to do that and it feels right for you to do that, please do so. I won't say don't do it. I'm going to be like, hey, this is not my thing, but you know what? Maybe it's your thing. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to show you kind of like a spread that I have when it comes to getting to know like how are you and your deck doing? Like what is kind of your deck? What is it? What are things that we can work on? How does it feel about me? And this such. So I'm just going to show you an example. I'll use Old Reliable here, if that's okay. So we're going to ask us a couple questions. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to ask, what is the vibe of this deck? So how does it communicate? Is it a little bit more shy? Is it like super like, no, it's going to tell you to your face? Like what's the vibe of it? Like, is it going to be more kind or gentle? Or is it going to be maybe a deck that, come on, nope, you got to go back on because paper. Because, because sometimes some decks are really shy, some decks are really forceful. I've yet to meet a deck of mine that doesn't say, just get your shit together, we're not going to be kind, we're just going to tell you like it is. But that can be different for every deck. And then the second thing we're going to ask is what type of readings are you good for? So some decks are really, like I said, I have some decks that are very situational. They're good at reading darker energies. There are some decks that are better at reading everyday stuff. There are decks that are only coming out if they're being called to. Like I said with my landscape tarot, like that deck doesn't come out unless like it absolutely, it's very good at specific things. It's not a general everyday deck. So, and then we're going to look at what the significator for like how does the deck see you? What's your significator? And then we're going to ask how like how do you feel about me? Like how does the deck feel about me? Like with that relationship that you're building. And then the last thing we're going to ask is what is the deck's significator? Like what can we know about the deck? What's its personality like? How it communicates versus its personality can be different. So those are the 5 questions we're going to be asking. And so let's take a look. Okay, my Druid's Tarot. I'm going to try and make sure we don't show nudity. So I'm just going to grab my rocks out first because this does have a nudity in these cards. So we just like to have people on standby. All right, so we're going to take a look at what is kind of the vibe of this deck? How do they communicate? The Death card reversed. Okay. Also, typically, you don't read reversals when you do this. I found I just have all the reversals put into my deck like this already, so what's the communication style of this deck? It's all about transformation. It's like I'm going to talk to you about transformation, but also in this death card because of the imagery, this isn't just about death. This is all about transformation. I also get that this woman here is, as we can see, she's kind of like doing rituals, spells, but she seems like a woman who is, I don't offer death, but it's like I'm here for that transition from one point to another. Seeing this in that point of what is the vibe of this deck, what's my communication style, it's going to be one of wisdom with just looking at the age of the woman, but it's also going to be one of not what I'm here for, but it's like I got old advice, and it's going to be good advice, wisdom, and the such for. So you better listen. It's like I get like old granny vibes. Like I'm going to talk to you like I'm your old granny. So I got stories to tell people the things and a lot of good advice that, you know what? I've been married for how many X years to your grandfather? And you know what? I could tell you stories. So, okay. Now we're going to look at what kind of readings am I good at. King of Pentacles. This is all about prosperity, building your excuse me. So what kind of readings are we good at? It's one about building prosperity in your life. So that is around, some may say like material influences. Others would say this is going to be like, how do you build generational stuff around you from like a material aspect, emotionally, mentally, physically. It's like this is a deck of like how can we bring in your wealth, your prosperity, and bring everything up around with you. How you're building your empire. Okay, so then let's take a look at what's my significator in this deck. The 10 of Cups, which is about family. So they see me as someone who's like, I'm family. I mean, I've had this deck for a really, really long time. So they see me as family at this point in time. Someone who's like, you've built a reputation with us. Like, you are like we've seen you grow from from big to small to now you're growing up even more. It's like a family card. So you're building up your legacy and everything. Okay, so they're like, your family. I love that. That warms my heart. All right. So then how is our relationship? Well, 5 of Wands, it did come up, but it's like, we gotta fight every once in a while. Sometimes we have different opinions or differing views about how things are going, which is okay. Remember, sometimes you gotta fight for what you want for, and sometimes I like to fight things, okay? It's fine. It's fine. And then let's take a look at what's the deck's personality. The Sun, which is, it's bright. We shine a spotlight on things. We're trying to lift up, engage, and see people in a really, like, this is a really happy deck. Like, I'm not going to go to this deck. Like, this is a fun, loving deck of, like, this is like the trickster granny is kind of what I get. It's like, this is a grandmother who has been, like, around for a really long time, but she's always pulling pranks. She's always saying something out of pocket, even though you're like, Grandma, why'd you gotta say that? And that's what this deck is to me. It's like, this is my family, this is my home. And sometimes we do fight, but I think this is overall, this card did want to come out reverse, which is all about peace and harmony as well. So again, this is kind of the spread that I like to use, and again, I've been using this deck for a while. So this is like this reading is probably going to be pretty atypical from, say, like a deck that you're first starting off with. Some I would assume a lot of like the relationship stuff, and like how does the deck feel about you. A lot of it is going to be different by each person, but I would say a lot of it, sometimes there might be some trepidation, but as you build and you work with a deck really, really well, like you're going to find, like you're going to build a relationship with it, as you build because as it's like the deck will also be building a relationship with you, and as you build a relationship with yourself. So that's kind of what I have here today for just learning about stuff and tarot and the such. So thank you so much for watching. If you have questions, or if there's other things you would like for me to like address or go over, let me know in the comments down below, and I would love to talk to you about everything. So thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you guys in more videos like this coming up. So bye.